What's up, sons? It's Blind Rod with Tech once again, and welcome to another clickbait video. Today we're going to be talking about the I9-9900K and the rumors of it having a leaked benchmark on the Time Spy benchmark, which is an odd one to run it on as well. I'm not sure what's going on here. Let's talk about it. We're also going to kind of deep dive into some of the scores, what might be going on, if it's actually accurate or if it could be false, right after this. Welcome back. So I was on the website called TechSpot, which isn't notorious for super solid rumors, but we went ahead and took a look at their most trending articles, which was on the I9-9900K. If you guys aren't familiar with that entire line, I'll link some more info down below, but essentially it's going to be Intel's new processor to compete with the Ryzen 7 2700X. So yes, that means that it's going to be an 8-core processor with 16 threads. It will have hyper-threading, and it's presumed to hit 5 gigahertz at turbo. Now the base clock is supposed to be somewhere around 3.6, but as you'll see in the benchmark here shortly, it shows a base clock of 3.1 gigahertz. If you look at what the processor is registering as, it's an Intel 0000, which is also curious enough. And then when we start taking a look at the performance of it, it's plausible. We're seeing a score at stock speeds presumably of about 10,700 on the physics score for this processor. Now it was running a 1080 Ti, which I actually have a 1080 Ti, and I've run the Ryzen 7 2700, and that will score about 8,000 points, while the 2700X is a little bit above that, around 9,000 points. So you're talking about a 10% increase in performance on the physics side of a DirectX 12. So it's not really conducive to determining actual CPU load other than GPU physics, well, not GPU physics, but graphics engine physics, which is kind of hard to really compare and contrast what we're actually looking at as far as processing power. Now, of course, if Intel wanted to leak something, leaking something along the lines of gaming would be to their benefit because they seem to do a little bit better in that. And that's also why you see most of the time, if you see an early leak or see AMD presenting stuff, you'll see them using something like Blender because AMD does a lot better in Blender. Either way, we are reasonably certain that we're getting an 8-core, 16-thread CPU from Intel, and then they're apparently going to be stripping the hyper-threading out of their i7. I'm not sure how I feel about that yet. Come back around to me when they actually release the processors. And apparently we're going to be hitting 5 gigahertz on the top of the line, now consumer line i9, I guess is what you would call it. I looked into this a little bit further because TechSpot also made either a typo or are not reporting correctly. They said that it was actually beating the Ryzen 7 2700X while that Ryzen was overclocked to 5 gigahertz, so a core to core and clock to clock better performance on the leaked i9-9900K, and this is verifiably false. You can go on to the 3D Mark website right now and pull up a 2700K only clocked at 4.4 gigahertz, and it's scoring 10,900 on the Time Spy physics test, which is 200 more points than the presumed, of course, leaked i9-9900K. And if you had or could have a Ryzen 7 2700X running at 5 gigahertz, I can pretty much guarantee it would be better. Now, there's a caveat to that I might need to go ahead and point out here, and that's that in that test with the 2700X, it was running with memory at 3600 megahertz, while on the i9-9900K, you only had memory of 2666 megahertz. But if you guys haven't really heard this argument before, basically AMD scales a lot better with memory speed because of the way they have their architecture designed, and Intel doesn't really scale above anything of 2666 megahertz, and seeing that it's just basically a refresh of the Z370 platform to the Z390, I'm not really seeing a huge difference in architecture, or presuming that there will be one for Intel. I think it'll be an incremental step with essentially more cores added, which seems to be the big battle going on right now. Now, if we are talking about price to performance, it's going to be very key where the 9900K comes in, because as we've seen in the past, any of the K series CPUs do not come with CPU coolers, and currently you can get 3.9 to 4.1 gigahertz overclocks on the Ryzen CPUs on their stock cooler. Now, that's with, of course, the more upgraded stock cooler that comes with the 2700 and the 2700X, excuse me. That is a caveat. However, if you're not going to include a cooler that can keep a 5 gigahertz CPU cooled, and you're even within the ballpark of that 2700, it's going to be kind of interesting. I assume the cooling potential is going to have to be pretty serious. If we take a look at some of the more recent Intel enthusiast parts, we see that while their TDP appears to be reasonable, that as soon as you start getting things like multi-core enhancement or trying to hit that advertised boost clock, the power consumption goes through the roof. So the 95 watt TDP of these 9900Ks is probably not going to be a 5 gigahertz boost there. I highly doubt it. And if we're over 95 watts, the cooling potential is going to be pretty hard to meet. And by that I mean, I think you're going to have to invest in a pretty beefy cooler, which is going to drive the price up. On the other hand, though, of course, if you want the best performance out of Ryzen currently, the memory speed is going to drive the price up. So keep that in mind. Both sides have their pluses and minuses here. In my humble opinion, I would have preferred that Intel kind of, go with the solder that they are rumored to be going with now, and then probably go for a more conservative boost clock, somewhere around 4.5, maybe 4.6. However, I realize that because of the competition, getting that 5 gigahertz number is there. I just don't think it's reasonable that they're doing that, because as we've seen with some of the enthusiast line, at least in my personal experience with the 7820X, it has a lot of issues as far as reliability when you start trying to hit that, or if you enable multi-core enhancement. You can't really cool it that well, and it's very frustrating because it's a less reliable product. I think Intel already has the strength on compatibility, as well as if you're even talking about the arguments lately with content creation and the improvement for Intel as along the lines of Adobe Premiere and Adobe applications, they have a really strong foothold there. So to introduce any sort of reliability issues by pushing to 5 gigahertz, it could spell out the fall of the blue team as far as from OEMs and more of their enterprise reliability. Now, of course, these are consumer parts and they're enthusiast parts, so I guess you get away with it, but I just don't think you should get away with it. I'm curious what you guys think. What's been your experience recently with the 8700K? Is anybody here on, the current enthusiast platform with Skylake or Kaby Lake E? I'm curious what your guys' thoughts on them. I haven't been super impressed with it, and it did take a while, of course, for X399 to come in and of itself. I think it took almost a year before the Elgato or any other PCI device except for graphics cards was working in my motherboard, which was super annoying, and the audio still has issues. So there's a lot of growing pains going on in the industry, and we're pushing so far and so fast into having the fastest processor with the most cores that we're forgetting the principles of having a machine that can do the computing tasks reliably that we need to get done. Hope to hear from you guys. Come chat with me in Discord. It'll be linked in the description below. You can also hit me up on Twitter at SonOfATech, or come watch me play, of course, some Warframe over on twitch.tv/SonOfATech_. I stream really early in the mornings, 5 a.m. Central Standard Time. Hope to see you there. See you next Tuesday, though.